Hi, what's going on guys? It is Rainy Krayos. In today's video, I am going to be confronting some of my personal biggest problems on the current Destiny 2 state of the game. Now, I have been playing since Destiny 1 beta just to add some validation to my words, and as of right now, a very vast and large amount of the community, including myself, can come together and say Destiny 2 is not what it once was. I'm going to be covering a few topics today and mainly explain my opinions on the subject instead of going over what the community wants as a melting pot. Reason for this is majority of the large Destiny YouTubers and streamers are the community's voice and have already thoroughly expressed to Bungie their concerns whether or whether not they were heard. As for the topics I will be talking about, I will start with some history for the game and go into some of my largest concerns with content continuations and how I wish the game could have been saved and possibly changed for the better. I want to start off with the beginning of Destiny, the start of the community and my own expectations for the game. We all know Destiny 1 was a fantastic game. The execution amongst all of their DLC releases and content drops were pretty much unbeatable. The community was fuming with excitement and the want for more. However, a lot of you, including myself who played vanilla Destiny 1, also remembers how bad the game was before the Dark Below. Content was not there, the game felt slow and repetitive, and the grind was rough. Now, with all that being said, the game hardly had any expectations for it. It was a new title. I think the biggest expectation we had for Destiny 1 was the hope it would be fun due to the fact that it was made by Bungie, the former creators of the massive title Halo. And that it was. But gradually, DLC after DLC, Bungie set the pace for what the community knows now they are capable of producing. And to put it plainly, their new content pales in comparison to what we knew they were capable of. Unfortunately, they decided to release Destiny 2 too soon and made the same mistake they did with Destiny 1. Content starvation after just a month. But there is a new problem. The community knows what Bungie is capable of when it comes to Destiny. Bungie set that pace back in Destiny 1 and with that broke a lot of the community's trust. Later on down the line, they started coming out with DLCs mimicking their D1 timelines. Curse of Osiris came out, and it was a complete disappointment to most. The patrol space looks as if it could be a final boss's strike room, due to how small it is. Moral of the story is they once again broke the community's trust. Warmind. Similar in problems, however, with this DLC, we actually got a tiny bit more content, I would argue, and gear definitely worthy of farming for. However, once again, furthering down their rabbit hole, the community was distraught. How could these DLCs be released by this same company that made The Taken King? The Forsaken. Arguably one of the best DLCs Bungie has released in Destiny 2 for a lot of reasons. One of the most notable reasons was the conversion back to the original primary, special, and heavy slots instead of the former double primaries. This DLC made Destiny 2 feel alive again, adding two enticing new areas, the Reef and the Dreaming City, that were massive, beautiful, and bringing back some of that mysterious D1 feel. We got content that explained really intriguing information, more about things we previously knew existed, like the Reef from Destiny 1 House of Wolves, and Wish Dragons, Ahamkaras. The community, I'm sure, as a whole, had a big sigh of relief due to the fact that the content was new, refreshing, fun, mysterious, and in more ways like Destiny 1 than Destiny 2 had been previously. And after Forsaken, we had finally gotten the return of the moon, Shadowkeep. With this DLC, there is some interesting lore that comes into light, like the pyramid ship that lies beneath the surface of the moon, We had only previously seen this in loading screens whilst updating our game, but now we have clues as to what it may be, and furthering that mystery factor that we all came to love Destiny 1 for. Now, I'm not going to cover all of the seasons and show my reasons for being good or bad. However, I would say collectively they were all for the most part good. Yes, there were a lot of highs and lows through the years, but I would argue Bungie definitely delivered majority of them well within certain exceptions, which I will get into towards the end of the video. Beyond Light. I personally thought this DLC was really awesome because for the first time we are able to wield the darkness. Thoughts of this were only previously imagined in post years. And how cool would it have been to use the darkness against the darkness, and Bungie did exactly that for us. Finally, we revisited the Exostranger that we all knew very little about, and putting the puzzle pieces together and completing that story. Lore-wise, this DLC was great. Content-wise, it was pretty good too. The raid I really enjoyed, and it was difficult, and that is exactly how it should be. It doesn't feel nearly as rewarding completing an easy raid and reaping the rewards from it as it does a difficult one. Lightfall. Lightfall had a good amount of content, however, it was to most players as well as myself the beginning of the end of Destiny 2, and that thought alone made me consider what set this DLC apart from others, because after all, this could be one of the last ever DLCs in a 10-plus-year-old title. Fact was, this DLC was hardly special compared to others. It didn't feel fresh, it seemed like they were trying to follow the subclass train. They started with Stasis and 2.0 and 3.0 subclasses. The biggest thing being the introduction of Strand, a new darkness element, which, yes, was cool, but with all that considered, I still thought Lightfall was entertaining enough with the story alone. It was just sad that it did not live up to my expectations. The final shape. The end of the line, your final mission. Defeat the Witness, the ultimate darkness. I clearly was sad due to the fact I did not want this game to die. This had been my favorite game for a long time, but Bungie delivered a surprisingly nostalgic expansion, which honestly made me want Destiny 1 back even more. We revisited a blast from the past at every turn. My only problem was that I think they could have delivered it better if they weren't so focused on trying to give players a taste of Destiny from its prime. You see it all the way back in the Shadowkeep with the return of many old bosses, now turned nightmares. The recycled content coming back is proof Bungie wanted to give players the ability to relive the best moments in Destiny. All said and done, it was befitting of a final expansion. I did think it could have been executed better, however. Edge of Fate. Following the defeat of the Witness, Bungie was not finished just yet. They decided to come out with Edge of Fate, and in terms of lore, the DLC was great. In terms of the DLC itself, it was massively frustrating and honestly kind of boring. You spent the entire time doing jump puzzles in an electric ball, and every fight you could imagine, it was always going to include one of those 3 mechanics they included in the campaign. Absolute disappointment of a DLC, to be honest. I would prefer Curse of Osiris or Warmind over this any day of the week, which is saying quite a lot. Renegades, the most recent DLC added to the game and the continuation of Edge of Fate. It is a DLC uniquely revolving around Star Wars. The story and lore coincide with Edge of Fate, as the Nine and its counterparts are deeply rooted in the antagonist and protagonist story at this point, learning things formerly not even known possible. The story definitely is reminiscent of Star Wars, however, the lore definitely matches up with our story as of now. I enjoyed this DLC, however, majority of the community did not return for it, as their trust had already been broken numerous times previously, and who could blame them? Now, Destiny's mystery factor. We all, at least a majority of the player base, didn't fully understand the darkness, and that was a good thing. What is unknown can be expanded upon. However, with the final shape being the end of the Light Saga, Destiny felt more lifeless than ever previously imagined. The story was done. It had finally been put to rest. The only thing that could honestly keep the community alive at this point was the release of a foe different than Darkness, but still posed the same threats as them, not just to Guardians, but to the entire system of Soul. And for the most part, I would like to believe that the 9 being reintroduced was definitely a good idea at this point, because it did fit into those categories, but it just didn't feel as if it really was something that dangerous, or more rather mysterious. We had already learned so much about the 9 in Edge of Fate that the mystery factor was gone. We knew our enemy and our protectors. The 9, being fairly evenly split, had their own goals as to what they wanted to achieve. Regardless of if we are in the way, some of the 9 wanted to help, others did not. With all this knowledge, it is safe to say they are definitely some sort of supreme existence, but we already know so much about them, it forced their story to become linear, because now there is barely wiggle room for the mysterious factor anymore. It seems so forced they threw out new content for us to grasp at our time of wanting more, because we all didn't want our Guardian story to stop at the Witness. Now, with the continuation of the Fate Saga, I would like to point out it has gotten slightly better with Renegades. However, I highly doubt they would be able to keep these collaborations with different companies like they did with Star Wars to make their dying game more interesting. We, and I, want something fresh. The platter has been soiled, with each hand pulling at their formerly great game, trying to grasp what's left. I think it's safe to say we need something different. It seemingly couldn't get worse from this point, but I have been proved wrong in the past. There are so many aspects of the game that need to be addressed. The story needs to become fresh, new, and ultimately unique. The Crucible hasn't been revamped in years, making it unbalanced and honestly not nearly as fun as it once was. The recycled content needs to be cut back. It is hard to enjoy a game that forces you to play reused content to farm out reskins of previous weapons. There's a lot I can cover, but I believe for now I have discussed my frustrations. I would hardly say I offer solutions to Bungie, but rather I am pointing out some of the issues that have been years in the making and need to be addressed for Destiny to ever come close to returning to its former glory. As I am not a developer of the game, simply a consumer with an opinion. With all that being said, I love Destiny for what it is. It was a great game for the vast majority of its lifeline, and I would like to see it be a great game once again. Without further ado, guys, I will see you in the next video. Peace.